How do we get to 1 trillion? What needs to shift or change, or does something need to change fundamentally for us to get to these projections that Google, Temasek, and Bain have actually outlined for the economy here in the region?
Yes, so again, hitting 200 billion GMV 3 years ahead of schedule. But what I think is important to point out, too, is that as we have opened back up post-pandemic, there is a lot of mobility, including to retail places, so your malls, your restaurants, movie theaters. In fact, mobility in retail places has actually surpassed pre-pandemic in multiple countries, yet the digital economy still grew by 20% year on year. And what I think that signifies is that a lot of the adoption that took place during the pandemic, as you mentioned, is here to stay. So some new habits have been formed. So some of the things that will need to change looking forward is, as these macro headwinds are blowing on a global basis, companies are moving faster than they had anticipated or planned to profitability. So that's going to be really important. It's not just about growth, acquisition of new users, or total GMV, but about profitability.
In fact, one thing you brought up at the report also was a shift from customer acquisition towards deeper engagement. How crucial is that going to be for growth to hit these particular trajectories that you folks have actually projected?
It's going to be crucial, and we always knew that this would be, deeper engagement would be a phase of the digital economy, but again, it's just here sooner than anticipated because of the macro headwinds that are blowing. So we have high internet penetration at 77%. 100 million have come online in the last 3 years. But it's really going to be important to ensure now that that next wave of growth comes from what other more developed digital economies see, and that's deeper engagement in each of the sectors. So higher average order value, increased frequency, and also penetration into areas such as suburbia.
Indeed. I want to pivot now because you mentioned path to profitability and bringing Wai Hoong into the conversation. And it seems that this becomes the new buzzword actually for technology, not just here but across the world. And a big shift from the idea of growth at all costs, acquisition, getting into markets at any cost. Is the shift here to stay, and how is Temasek at least viewing the shift? Is this a healthy shift at least for an industry that maybe some might say is starting to actually show signs of quote-unquote growing up?
It's a great question. So I think the rising rate environment certainly has led to us to come to the conclusion that the growth at all costs strategy is no longer a viable strategy. I think especially for scaled and more mature companies. Investment hurdle rates are higher. Investors are continuing to pivot towards, once again, looking for profitability, looking for free cash flow, as well as normalized profit margins. Finding the right balance and calibrating between cost optimization and top-line growth is something that all companies are going to have to work through, which, I think to your point, I think is a very healthy shift. Now, where companies find that balance obviously will depend on where they are in their development life cycle. But regardless, I think this will push companies to focus really on discipline, thinking through pricing and incentives, thinking through how they, sorry, just lost my train of thought, pricing incentives, optimizing R&D, and certainly focusing on organizational efficiency. Thank you. Once again, all of which I think are going to be critical and important for and healthy for the industry going forward.